Charles Gavin betrayed me in the 10th year of our marriage by bringing his mistress's 2 children to me and telling me they were so poor they needed a father. However, when our daughter Riley clung to him, pleading with him to stay, he never faltered. I didn't fight, so I divorced Charles and took Riley with me, worried. On my 60th birthday, Riley and her husband informed me that they were busy with work, and my granddaughter had a last-minute tutoring session. They promised to help her. I never remarried, and years later, Riley found her own partner. My granddaughter was a joy, sweet, and lovely, and I spent my days caring for her. Life was simple, peaceful, and full. Join me in celebrating the following day. That evening, while browsing social media, I stumbled upon a local video showing 6 people singing around a cake in a posh private dining room at a hotel. My daughter, her husband, and Charles were standing together, with the 2 kids he had previously selected over us. I told Riley not to go overboard, but she refused, saying she had seen everything I had done for her over the years, and that this was her happy birthday to the woman he cheated on with all those years ago. Riley then turned to her and called her mother. She would take care of everything as a way to show her love, and her words warmed my heart. I was deeply touched after raising her alone for years and watching her grow up, get married, and have a child of her own. My son-in-law Jack was a kind, considerate, and respectful man who treated me like his own mother. My granddaughter, Riley, insisted on throwing a large celebration, and I was genuinely moved. As you get older, you start to crave things, and Annie was the sweetest little thing, always calling me Grandma in that soft, endearing voice. I was happy that the hurt of Charles's betrayal had gradually subsided over the years. Warmth, noise, children's laughter, and family companionship give life something to look forward to, so when the day finally came, I was overjoyed. I got up early, got dressed nicely, and drove Annie to school. Riley and Jack finished the breakfast I had set out on the table before leaving for work, and Riley assured me they would complete their morning chores came quickly, and I came home early to throw my birthday party, so I waited. I kept myself occupied by cleaning the house and watching the clock, but as the scheduled time passed, Riley hadn't returned home, so I was worried that something had happened. I was about to call her when my phone rang, and my mother called. Because something urgent had come up at work, Jack too, it's all so last minute that we really can't take time off, and we might not be able to celebrate your birthday today. Riley's voice was filled with guilt. I felt a pang of sorrow, but their careers were more important, so I pushed myself to remain composed and told her that it was all right. First, you two should concentrate on your work. I'll go pick Annie up from school. But before I could finish, Riley interrupted. It's your birthday, Mom, so you shouldn't be rushing around. One of my friends is visiting the school this afternoon, so they'll pick Annie up and take her to my office. Calm, simply stay at home and take it easy. Considering how busy Riley was and how young Annie was, I debated whether or not I should go. You have a lot on your plate, and that little one is such a handful, she could be a distraction while you're working. My words seemed to agitate Riley, and she raised her voice almost. Riley had been so busy that before I could reply, she hung up. I stared at my phone, listening to the blank silence on the other end, and sighed quietly. It's okay, Mom. My friend is already on the way, please don't worry, just take it easy at home. I have another meeting coming up. Feeling sorry for her and Jack, who had even lost weight recently, I went into the kitchen to prepare a nice dinner, something warm to soothe them after a long day. By the time dinner was ready, the house was immaculate, and since there was nothing else to do, I finally sat down on the couch and took out my phone for a brief break. At my age, I had grown fond of. I was about to close the app when my finger unintentionally tapped on the nearby section. In the first thumbnail, I recognized her right away. Just by looking at the back of her figure, I knew it was my daughter. I had been watching short videos online to kill time, but none of them were particularly interesting. Just 30 minutes ago, Riley's video was posted, and I clicked on it without thinking. It was set in a hotel's private dining room, and Riley was standing at the table with Jack holding Annie's hand next to her. The 3 of them were grinning as Riley turned her head slightly, and the camera panned to the side, which is when I saw him. T.S. if I had to. I had fallen in love when we were young and thought we would live a lifetime together in happiness, but in the 10th year of our marriage, his first husband died in a terrible car accident, leaving behind a distraught widow and 2 small children. At first, Charles helped. If you could name the person I hated the most in this life, it would be him. They were secretly slipping money behind my back. When I learned that we had a horrible argument, his face flushed with rage, and he accused me of being heartless. Shortly after, he stood in front of me with his first love's 2 children in his arms and divorce papers in hand. He claimed that David and Susan were too young, needed a father, so he was leaving me to be with her and be a father to their kids. That day, our daughter Riley clung to his leg and sobbed uncontrollably, begging him to stay, but Charles didn't hesitate. He turned his back on us and left without a second thought. I didn't beg. Instead, I took more than half of his belongings as part of the divorce settlement and left Riley with me. I changed her last name to Colin out of concern that a stepfather might mistreat her. I never got married again because I was committed to raising Riley, seeing her grow, sending her to college, and watching her fall in love. Love got married, had a little Annie, and throughout it all, Charles never showed up in our lives. From what I've heard, he and his first love never had any more children. Instead, he dedicated his life to raising her son and daughter. Riley used to tell me that she detested Charles, just as I did, and I had believed her. She would keep her distance from them because she was old enough to recall the pain of our divorce and would see them for the poison they were, but now that they had come into contact behind my back, I was watching them stand together in this video, smiling and talking, with Riley's eyes showing no signs of resentment. Commenced the song Happy Birthday to You, with Jack clapping and Annie joining with her small hands, maintaining rhythm. The two children Charles had selected above us, David and Susan stood next to them, singing as well, and in the middle of it all, encircled by them like a queen at court, was her kith, first love. She was still gorgeous in a gorgeous gown. A picture of effortless grace. She was lavished with attention, treasured, and honored, and she continued to live like a princess. I had nearly forgotten that she and I were born on the same day, but my phone fell out of my hand and landed on the floor, but the video continued to play on repeat, and my chest constricted as the person who had sacrificed everything for my daughter, Ms., stepped forward after the song, wrapped her arm around Catherine, and whispered, "Happy birthday, Mom." My daughter Riley, who had clung to me since childhood and had seen firsthand her father's cruelty, had a dull ache that was not just from anguish but also from disbelief. She had seen how Catherine played the part of the innocent victim, whispering. I apologized as she entered my house and tore my family apart, but how could she have called that woman? I sat frozen on the couch, unable to comprehend it until the pungent, acrid smell of something burning filled my nostrils. I had left it simmering on the stove, so I hurried into the kitchen and turned off the heat, my thoughts still unmoved. Unaware that I was distracted, I reached for the pot without thinking, and the hot metal burned my fingers, leaving a bright red burn on my skin. I was going to rinse my hand with cold water when the doorbell rang, and when I opened it, a delivery man was standing there with a cake that I had ordered for myself. Growing older makes you nostalgic. After Riley's call, I ordered a small cake online to commemorate the occasion. If no one else was coming to join me, I could still celebrate alone. I put the cake on the coffee table and pressed some candles on top of it. I had already decided what I wanted when I closed my eyes, and I had hoped that Riley would lead a happy and easy life, that Jack would love her unconditionally, and that my beloved Annie would grow up healthy and intelligent. However, when I closed my eyes, all I saw was Riley lying to me. When Jack and Annie celebrated Catherine's birthday, she had to work late, so I watched the movie in my head, where Catherine was surrounded by them, enjoying their love and the warmth of a true family, while I was sitting in a quiet house, feeling foolish and like a joke. My own flesh and blood, someone I had carried, loved, and gave up everything for had turned into the blade that sliced me the deepest. Too many tears fell down my cheeks before I could wipe them away, and I made a new wish, that in the time I have left, I can live for myself and be genuinely happy forever. Been for Riley's family, never for me, and now that I think about it, it wasn't worth it. I took a bite out of the cake, but it was too sweet and sickeningly rich, so I took another bite and pushed it away. I looked at the time, and it was past 11. On any other night, I would, after cleaning the house, putting Annie to bed, and going to bed myself. I was unable to sleep tonight because the front door creaked open. Riley crept inside, but as soon as she saw me sitting in the living room, she froze, her face flashing in fear. Jack and Annie followed her, but they didn't move, discussing the evening's banquet until they noticed me, at which point there was silence. Annie the young actress, acted as though nothing had happened, blinked her large, naive eyes, and extended her arms in my direction. "Grandma, I missed you hugging me," she said, running up to me in anticipation of the same warm reception. I had always given her the embrace, but this time I didn't lift her into my arms. I had loved her from the moment she was born, just as I had loved Riley, giving my all to raise her. Jack didn't have any parents, and he and Riley both had demanding jobs, so living in this city was costly, so I had taken care of Annie, granting Riley and Jack the freedom to concentrate on their careers without concern, but even this young girl, like her mother, had deceived me. I looked up to see Riley walking toward her face calmly as if nothing had happened. She even rolled her shoulders dramatically to show that she was exhausted. "Don't worry, Mom. We'll celebrate. Your birthday is properly tomorrow." Then she looked at the small cake on the coffee table and stopped, asking herself, "Mom, did you buy this for yourself?" Perhaps the cake was so small, or perhaps it was because the one they had for Catherine had been so much larger. The guilt in her eyes grew, and she realized there was no more use in playing this game. Riley straightened her gaze, seeking mine as I asked her directly, "Where did you go today?" She frantically searched for a response, but ultimately she decided to play stupid. "What are you talking about, Mom?" she asked, looking at Jack and Annie for support. Jack nodded right once. "Yeah, Mom. We didn't have cake today, Grandma." And her little voice faltered. "The longer I stood up all day at work, the more my back hurt." Annie, eager to imitate her father, shook her head so violently that it was amazing she didn't get lightheaded. Riley barely had time to cover Annie's mouth with her hand as they spoke, but it was too late. She could only force an awkward smile and try again. "Don't get me wrong, Mom. Annie became restless at my office, so I bought her a small cake to keep her busy." The lie was pitiful, and the disappointment in my chest subsided. Like a heavy stone, she froze, her lips parted as if seeking an excuse, but no words came, so she sank onto the couch next to me with a sigh, all pretense crumbling, when she finally spoke. "My mother." There was a defiant edge in her voice. I took out my phone, found the video, and threw it onto the table in front of her. "You're not young anymore, so why can't you let this go? Even if you can, why do it every year on your birthday? Have I ever missed you on Catherine's birthday? I know you despise your father, but he's still my father for your sake, and I haven't seen him much over the years." She never expresses it aloud, but she wishes for our family to be complete again on the same day as yours. I reasoned that since we all live together, why not celebrate her birthday first and yours tomorrow, Mom? "You're getting old, stop being such a baby. Jack and I work hard every day, and to be honest, it's easier for me when I spend time with Dad." Her complaints struck me like ice against my already frozen heart when I looked closely at her. "You're saying that I've been preventing you from getting back in touch with your father?" She glanced away, but I examined her expression and didn't say anything. When I first met her, she was 6 years old, and she looked exactly like Catherine. Perhaps this is why Charles showered Catherine's children with his fatherly love after the divorce, even though she didn't resemble Charles at all. Riley had. I held her, her little body shaking with grief, and I thought, what a cruel thing for my child to have such a heartless father. "I'm heartbroken and confused, Mom. Why doesn't Dad want me? Why does he want to be someone else's father? Doesn't he love me anymore?" Riley didn't seem to notice the change in tone, but instead she clung to my arm and complained as she always did, "Mom. That's not what I meant, but consider this, Dad's old now, and no matter what happened in the past, I still carry his blood in my veins, don't you think? Time to move on from the bitterness." Catherine was a really good person back then, taking Dad away because she was concerned about her siblings growing up without a father. She apologized to me, Mom, and even buys me presents and treats me like her own daughter, so why hold on to something that happened so long ago? You're old now, too, so why don't you just move on? I stared at her, unable to control the sour laugh that escaped my throat. Charles, her father, had abandoned her without hesitation, and she had sobbed in my arms for many nights, wondering why he didn't want her, and Catherine, the woman who had destroyed our family because she bought a few gifts, but Riley had forgiven her so easily that I yanked my arm away, saying, "Riley, you're being unreasonable for not forgiving Charles and Catherine." Riley nodded. "Well, yeah, I was just a kid back then, so any anger I had has long faded. When I close my eyes, all I can remember are the good times and how good my dad was to me when I was a child. I want us to be a family again. Don't you think Catherine is cute? Perhaps you two could even be sisters." Before she finished, my hand slammed into her face, causing her to stagger back and hold her cheek. She then scowled at me, her voice rising in anger. "What the hell is wrong with you, Mom? Why would you strike me?" she asked. It's no wonder Dad loved Catherine. She's nice and sweet, not some cruel. Before I could say another word, the old woman who couldn't let go started crying and running into her room. Jack and Annie followed her, their voices hurried with concern, and I could still hear their muffled whispers from inside. "She's getting senile, hanging on to." I eventually broke down when the daughter I had loved for half my life said, "Some ancient grudge forever, no wonder she got dumped. What a cranky old hag," and more. I got up, walked to my room, and started packing my belongings for the years Riley and I had been together. Jack had put in a lot of work, but because housing costs were so high, they were still paying off their mortgage. I felt bad for them, so I helped them out each month with food, utilities, and even Annie's art lessons. However, since I was leaving, I wouldn't be giving them another cent, whether they could finance their house without my help, so that was no longer a concern of mine. Riley was unaware that I owned another property, which I had kept hidden from everyone. I had purchased it a long time ago in case Jack betrayed Riley the way Charles had betrayed me. So I kept the house in my name, intending to leave it to Riley. Was still crying when I left my room. The little cake on the coffee table was still unfinished, the candles had never been lighted, and everything looked so pathetic that I decided that since it was no longer necessary, the house would be my haven and I could live nicely on my own with the money I had left. She was my daughter, the child I had raised for more than 20 years, and I immediately grabbed my suitcase and left. The house. By the time I got settled, it was already 3 o'clock in the morning. I showered and lay down in bed, and when I checked my phone, there were no missed calls or unread messages, but nothing. The idea made my heart hurt, but perhaps suffering was a good thing because it prevented me from doubting myself and from stupidly persuading myself to go back. I canceled my regular morning alarm, turned off the lights, covered myself with a blanket, and forced all superfluous thoughts out of my head. I had trouble sleeping, and my dreams kept taking me back to the times when Riley and I were the only ones, and Charles was adamant about getting a divorce from me though I took most of his wealth. Riley was still too young, and the betrayal had destroyed her small world. She was so traumatized that she was restless at night, waking up screaming from nightmares and pleading with me to keep her from leaving. For a while, she was unable to even attend school, so I was forced to quit my job and stay at home with her. I would sit by her side all night long, holding her close and humming the lullaby I used to sing when she was younger. By morning, her face would be calm, her breathing steady, and my back would hurt from holding her. She would struggle to move back, but Riley would notice that I was uncomfortable and take my hand in her little fingers and begin massaging my arm while whispering, "Mommy, I'll make it better. I'll make the pain go." I exhaled deeply and opened my eyes, picking up my phone to check the time even though I had turned off my alarm. Years of habit had woken me up at the same hour every other morning. On any other morning, I would have gone straight to the kitchen to make breakfast before waking Annie, who always refused to get up immediately, preferring to roll around in bed as I carried and coaxed her, helped her wash up, and helped her braid her hair into cute little pigtails. After she finished breakfast, I would take her to preschool, and by the time I returned home, Riley and Jack would have already eaten and gone to work, so I would begin cleaning up, doing the dishes, and organizing the house. Every minute of the day was spent with them. I never had any alone time. However, now that I was up and only had to prepare breakfast, I went for a leisurely walk around the neighborhood, which included a little jogging. I wanted to live a comfortable, unhurried life, but before I even ended my walk, when Riley's call began to come in, I ignored the first one, the second, and the third, and by the fifth, my finger unintentionally touched the screen, connecting the call. I didn't put her on speaker, but Riley's voice was so loud that it didn't matter. "You're not a teenager, so where in the hell did you go all night? Annie just leaves like that, and do you even mind that she was nearly late for school because you didn't prepare breakfast? Do you think we'll arrive at work hungry? Do you realize how crucial my meeting is today? I can't afford to be late," and every word was an accusation. "You're living with us for free, Mom, while Jack and I work ourselves to the bone. You get to enjoy an easy life at home, and now you're just going to do it." I didn't say anything, but Riley wasn't done. "All I asked was for you to help out a little, watch Annie cook some meals, and clean the house." I chuckled quietly as I realized that my daughter, for whom I had given my entire life, was unable to see it. He had never seen it. Perhaps yesterday, I would still have experienced a pang of sorrow. After all these years of relying on one another, we would have still maintained some residual attachment, but now I just felt let down. "Riley," I said in a calm voice, "I may have lived in your home, but the mortgage payments, groceries, and bills all came from I took care of your home, your child, and your money all of your life. If you believe that I'm living a comfortable life, then you can take care of everything on your own going forward. As for me, since you no longer want me to be your mother, I don't need you as my daughter," so I ended the call before she could answer, but the conversation had already left a bad taste in my mouth, so I went home and changed into some nice clothes. I also decided to go shopping because for years, I had spent all of my time and money on Riley and her family. I hardly ever went to the mall, and I hardly ever bought anything for myself, but now that the burden was off my shoulders and I had enough money saved to live comfortably, why not some nice clothing and some lovely accessories, so why not turn into a chic, carefree little old lady? It didn't sound bad at all. I didn't think I would run into him when I finally treated myself to a carefree shopping trip. He was walking alongside Catherine, and the two of them entered a clothing store directly in front of me. Charles looked nervous the moment he noticed me, his eyes darting away. Catherine, on the other hand, grinned widely and walked toward me, looking arrogant as ever. "Oh, Laura, fancy running into you here shopping for clothes too," she said, purposefully drawing attention with her loud voice. After sweeping her gaze over me, she shook her head theatrically and sighed. "Goodness, you're always busy taking care of the house and the kids. Even if you buy something nice, when will you have time to wear it?" She then leaned in slightly and spoke in a fake whisper that was loud enough for people to hear. Or had you finally said if Catherine thought she could embarrass me in public, she was in for a surprise. I grinned as more people turned to watch us and then let out a dramatic scream. "You have your sights set on an elderly man and want to dress up a bit." A few nearby shoppers turned their heads at the obvious provocation. The words had the desired effect, and the store fell into a stunned silence as realization set in. The way you threw yourself into my husband's arms right after your own died, bringing along your 2 kids, of course, with talent like that. I could never hope to compete, Catherine said. How could I ever compare to you? When a woman near the entrance gasped, "Oh, so she's an old homewrecker," Catherine's face flushed red with rage. Charles then stepped forward, his jaw clenched. Laura said, "That's enough." I turned to face him and said, "Everyone, meet the man who left his own daughter behind because someone else's he left his own child behind without looking back, but he was more than happy to play daddy to someone else's, and guess what? Those kids still only call him uncle." That last part struck close to home. It was a wound that Charles had never been able to heal even after raising his own children for so long. His children, like Catherine's, had never recognized him as their father. Now that he was being recognized in public, all he could do was stand there with his fists clenched at his sides and his face dark with rage. The laughter around us increased, and someone muttered, "What a fool," while another snickered about being a doormat. Catherine's anger was evident in every tense muscle in her face, but rather than argue, she grabbed Charles's arm and pulled him toward the exit. Then, as if fate had a peculiar sense of humor, Riley showed up. She was leaving work and strolling through the mall when she saw Catherine. "What's wrong?" she asked, her concern obvious. Voice, the annoyance and rage that had only moments before consumed Catherine vanished as she straightened her posture and assumed a pathetic stance. She then turned to face me and sighed. "Oh, it's nothing, your mother is still upset with me. That's all," she said. "I guess I shouldn't have asked you to celebrate my birthday with me." Was gentle and just the right amount of sad. Riley's eyes suddenly snapped to me, her lips pressed into a thin line. Still upset from our earlier argument, she took Catherine's hand without hesitation and turned on me, giving me an accusing glare. "Mom, do you have to keep throwing tantrums like this? Just look at Catherine, she's kind, gentle, and understanding." Her words were a knife to my heart, and I smacked her heart with my hand. She gasped and staggered back, her hand flying to her cheek, her eyes wide with astonishment. "In the meantime, you're always so resentful and furious. Do you wonder why Dad picked her over you, Mom?" I looked at her, the daughter I had loved more than life itself, and yet I felt nothing but emptiness. As I looked at her, it was a cold, detached understanding that the last thing holding me to her had been severed, and this girl, this lady, was no longer my kid, so I reached out and said, "If you love Catherine and Charles so much, then go ahead and call them Mom and Dad. I don't want to be your mother anymore." Riley laughed sharply and looped her arm through Catherine's as if to get even with me. "Fine, who needs a mother like you anyway? Catherine is a better mom than you ever were, at least she knows how to let go of the past rather than dwelling on it like a bitter old hag." So she turned to Charles and Catherine and said, "I'm coming home with you tonight. We're going to have a real family dinner, not sit around sulking over things that happened decades ago." As she was speaking, she moved too quickly, and a driver's license fell out of her pocket. It hit the floor softly, but instinct forced me to look down. The ID had landed face up, and the recent photo had Riley Spencer's name printed clearly. I froze, and Riley followed my gaze, but as if suddenly recalling what had happened, she hesitated, a glimmer of guilt in her eyes, but she quickly masked it, and she brushed a hand over her nose. "What's a name? Isn't it common for children to adopt their father's last name? The father doesn't have any other children who share his name. I was just making things right. Do you need to make a big deal out of this as well?" Her annoyance increased, even though I hadn't spoken. She begged me to change her last name, saying, "I don't want Dad anymore." She sobbed while curled up in my arms, and I hardly heard her because we were the only family we needed. "Now that we are together, Mommy, I want your last name so we can always be together." No, she was Riley Spencer, and she had severed the last connection between us. I raised my hand and waved her away, and my voice was emotionless and calm. "Do whatever you want, change your name, and live your life, it doesn't matter to me anymore." Finally, I decided that I was done being her mother. She had grown up, and if this was her decision, then so be it. On the way home, I blocked Riley's number and all other contacts and connections, and then I looked at my savings and my recently transferred the profits from my investment fund and promptly made an internet reservation for a group tour. For years, I had given Riley everything, and she had promised me that when I grew up, when I graduated, when I had a job, and when I saw the many beautiful places in the world, I would never see them. I got married and had children, and when the children grew up, I waited year after year, promise after promise, but the good news was that I didn't have to wait any longer. I saw mountains, stood by the beach, and took in the fresh air without worrying about getting home for dinner in time. During dinner, I met Vanessa, who was in the same travel group as me. Like me, she had devoted her entire life to her family, and her main dream had been to travel the world with her husband and kids. However, they called her selfish, saying that people her age should be at home caring for their grandchildren. Chastised for having some shame and being so devastated that she took her savings, cut off all communication, and embarked on a trip of her own. We clicked right away, and we played, laughed, and said goodbye before parting ways. We exchanged numbers, and we agreed to go on another trip together. However, there was always some trouble in our group. For example, there was a man a year older than me, whose wife had died years ago, and whose children were married and had children of their own. He claimed that living in a house without a Laura, you don't have a husband, and I don't have a wife. So why not? I'll give you my savings. You won't have to do much but cook, clean, and take care of me. It gets lonely for women. When he found out I was divorced, his eyes literally lit up. When my kids get busy, I ignore him because it's an easy life. He didn't get the hint, and when I got home and dragged my suitcase through the door, I hardly had time to unpack before I noticed him standing at my doorstep holding a huge bouquet of red roses. Laura, he began flashing, what? I'm still a handsome guy, so walking around with me would make you look good. Come on, how come you've been alone for so long? I took a deep breath. 20 years ago, I would have picked up a broom and beaten him out of my yard, but at my age, I was more concerned about he complained the whole time, Laura, don't be so heartless. Don't you have feelings for me? I'm still in my 60s, that's young. Z said I phoned the police after fracturing my back and shattering his nose. As they carried him away, he complained. I finally had enough, so I picked up the trash bag by my door and threw it directly at him. Riley's voice, what are you doing here, pierced the air before I even saw her coming. She rushed toward me, her eyes darting from my face to the man who was still struggling in the officer's hands, and then as if abruptly her eyes were burning with anger, her accusations were sharp, and she turned and swung her purse at the man, hitting him repeatedly while screaming for him to get lost. Are you crazy, Mom? She pointed at me in shock, realizing that you were actually trying to get yourself a new husband, a stepfather for me. What the hell are you thinking? Since you're old enough that any man who shows interest in you is obviously after your money. And you fell for it like a naive fool. She turned back to me with a dark expression before looking over my shoulder at the house behind me. This is what you've been up to, she scoffed, ignoring my calls for months. She continued, her lips curving in disapproval. It must be nice to run away from all responsibilities while I'm stuck at home working and raising a child drowning in housework. You just disappeared, leaving me to deal with everything, and what do you do instead? Flirt with some random old man. Wow, what? The last time we met, I made it clear that if you really want Catherine, then go be her daughter. I'm done, I don't want to be your mother any longer. As for your house and your troubles, none of them are my concern. You are a terrific mother. Her voice was full of derision. I observed her with icy eyes. She blinked, finally understanding that I wasn't just having a fit. I had made my decision, but she wouldn't accept it. What do you mean, not my mother? I came from your body, and whether you like it or not, I'm still your daughter. She crossed her arms and gave me a glare. Jack and I don't make much money, and we have a child to raise. We haven't saved a dime since you left, so stop being so crazy and come home. The house is a mess, the bills are mounting, and you were responsible for paying the mortgage and the utilities. Just like that, my hand flew across her face, and I was completely and utterly done. I turned and headed home, not wanting to waste any more time listening to her drivel. Could you hear me, Mom? I told the truth, and you struck me again. It's no wonder Dad didn't want you. My steps stopped slowly. Riley, I said calmly, Charles divorced me because he was blind and an idiot, but you are his flesh and blood, and he still threw you away. So I picked up the second trash bag I hadn't thrown out yet and threw it directly at her head. She turned back around and raised an eyebrow smugly, thinking she had won and that I would finally give in. I didn't care. I turned my back on her once more, prepared to leave for good, but just as she opened her mouth to say something more to me, her phone rang. For kids who weren't even his, so tell me, between the two of us, who's the joke? There was a flicker of something in her eyes, possibly anger or shame. Took a frustrated look at the screen before responding, but as soon as she heard the person on the other end, she exclaimed, the house is on fire. Without saying another word, she swung around and fled, and the woman who had accompanied her paused before pursuing her while yelling, Miss Spencer. I moved in with Jack and Riley after they got married and had Annie because their parents had died a long time ago. I took care of their child and ran their household for years, making lots of friends in the neighborhood, especially Zoe, who served as the unofficial news channel for the community. Are we still looking at houses today? We had always gotten along well, and even after I moved away, Zoe would occasionally check in to remind me that I only needed to ask for help if I ever needed it. Naturally, within 30 minutes of the fire at Riley's house, Zoe was video calling me because she was always the first to know about anything and never kept it to herself. When the call came through, Zoe's beaming face filled the screen. She then pointed the camera at Riley's burned-out apartment window. Laura, your ungrateful daughter, finally realized what was coming to her. She laughed and then began to give a detailed report on everything that had happened over the past few months. It seems that Riley was unable to do so after I left. Between that and the several slaps I had given her, she had been furious and fueled by that resentment, which had brought her even closer to Catherine. Now, Catherine's 2 kids weren't exactly what you'd call good people. David was a sucky person who didn't enjoy going to school or working, he spent his days doing nothing. Susan, however, she had no interest in working either. Her life's ambition was to marry a wealthy man, so when Catherine saw that Riley had managed to purchase a large home, even though it was still mortgaged, she decided that was sufficient. Without further ado, she abandoned Riley and her 2 children because, as Catherine had stated, we are now a single family. Should hang out more. Of course, David and Susan were shameless. They began arriving at Riley's house every other day with nothing but food and drink. After they left, David even began inviting his group of sinister friends over for parties, turning the house into a disaster zone. David had put his foot down, and he and Riley had argued over it, but David didn't care. Then, tonight, David had brought his buddies here again, and they got wasted. One of them passed out on the couch, with cigarettes still burning between his fingers and an open bottle of beer nearby. A single thoughtless motion caused the cigarette to drop and the booze to spill, and suddenly the entire house was on fire. Jack had just returned from work when he noticed dense black smoke rising from the windows. David, the jerk, fled outdoors first, and when he saw Jack, he did the same. He demanded that Jack pay him compensation, cursed him out, blamed him for having a subpar home, and declared that Jack was responsible for his almost death. Jack lost it, and a full-fledged brawl broke out immediately. Neighbors arrived to break up the fight in the street, but neither man would back down. Then Riley showed up, and as soon as she entered the fray, Jack and David stopped fighting and turned against her. Instead, they attacked her together, hurling accusations at her from every angle and demonizing her as though she were the source of all evil. Ultimately, the house was completely destroyed by fire, leaving Riley with no other choice. She attempted to go to her loving father, Charles, whom she had proudly chosen over me, but Charles simply told her there was no room and closed the door in her face. The neighborhood had gathered outside their houses. At the end of the call, Zoe sighed in satisfaction as she watched the chaos unfold as if it were primetime entertainment, with her camera aimed directly at them, providing me with a live broadcast of my daughter's demise. I watched as Riley stood there, helpless, the ideal picture of karma finally catching up. Stated that bad people always find their equal, so don't you dare feel sorry for her, Laura? Having a daughter like that isn't worth it. I agreed, but as I saw the mayhem play out on my screen, I no longer felt any sympathy or grief. Life had never seemed more ironic to me, and Riley ultimately prevailed. She had obstinately stuck to her decision, bringing her family into Charles's house to demonstrate that she hadn't made a mistake, but she had no idea that it would destroy her. As for me, after that video call I stopped keeping up with Riley's life because I had better things to do with Zoe. Recently, I discovered a new hobby, pottery. There was something incredibly calming about molding soft clay into delicate figures and creating something lovely. I had been visiting the workshop for a few days in a row, and guess what? It was right next to it was a hotel called the Pottery Studio. On the day I finished firing my most recent piece, I went outside with my hands still warm from the kiln and walked straight into another catastrophe in front of the hotel entrance. Riley was standing across from her, looking unkempt, half-dressed, and completely unapologetically. "Susan," Jack said, and Riley's voice was raw. Trembling in shock, "We've been married for 7 years, and I gave birth to your daughter. How could you have done this to me?" She was screaming, her voice breaking, and she was holding Annie's little hand so tightly that the child appeared scared. Susan didn't even bother doing her clothes right. "O'Reilly, you've become a sulky old housewife with no job and no social life." She had never cared about appearances and had been so unafraid of shame from years of pursuing wealthy men that she smirked and leaned into Jack's arms to make herself comfortable in front of the thronging crowd. She tipped her head and batted her eyelids at Jack, asking him, "Tell me, baby, would you rather be stuck with her or be with me?" Riley's body shook as she gazed at Jack in desperation. "Stuck at home wiping snot and cleaning up after a brat all day, how could Jack not get sick of you?" she asked. Jack didn't even bat an eyelid, but instead he sneered, "Why are you making such a big deal out of this, Riley? You should have stayed at home with the kid. What are you even doing here? What man doesn't cheat?" he asked, sneering. "Your father did it, didn't he leave? If you could accept it back, then why the hell can't you accept it?" Riley's face turned deathly pale, and she repeatedly shook her head, saying, "Jack, but you were able to forgive him after he jabbed a finger at her and fled with another woman. You even began calling that woman mom, sis. How could you say that she tried to hit him when she lunged at him?" Jack just pushed her away and wrapped his arms around Susan, staring down at Riley as though she were a pitiful joke. "Riley, let's not fool ourselves. Did you believe your father took you back because he loved you? If I hadn't been earning a high income and purchasing that house, he wouldn't have given you another look. He only accepted you again because he Wanted more money for David and Susan, and you fell for it like a fool. But at least you did one thing right. He ran a hand down Susan's back. Susan is much more entertaining than I don't want the child you take, so let's end the ACT and get a divorce. We'll divide the money and part ways, and because you were so supportive of your mother's fate, I'm sure you won't mind taking her path. One blow after another. Her hands clenched into fists, her whole body trembling violently, her breathing ragged and on the edge of disintegration, every word stabbing into Riley's chest like a knife, while Susan just smirked and flipped her hair, casually before bending down to look at Annie. Sweetheart, she said, don't you believe your mother's overreactive adults constantly act in this manner, fussing over nothing? Riley's head jerked up, eyes wide with fury, and she sprang forward, dragging Annie away, but her hold was too harsh. In her panic. Too tight, Annie shouted, her little eyes welling with tears as she struggled against Riley, her little fists slapping at her arms. Riley froze Annie, choking her. I'm your mother, I gave birth to you and reared you. How can you claim that? She lifted her hand. When Riley gasped in agony, Annie bit down on her wrist and ran straight into Susan's arms. She then turned and glared at Riley, her face contorted in anger. You're always mean to me. I don't want you. I want Susan to be my mommy. Everything ceased, and Riley stood there, her eyes glassy with astonishment and trembling, until her face briefly met mine, appearing to freeze in time before twisting into an unreadable anguish realization. Perhaps only perhaps she saw for the first time the harsh, unforgiving irony of it all, that she had turned into me, that everything she had done to me, every injury, every betrayal, had come back to haunt me, and now she was the one being discarded. Just as she had done to me after a full day of since their house burned down. Riley, Jack, and Annie had been living at Charles's house, but tension between them had been building for a while without me there, and they had no one to deal with. School. Zoe bombarded my phone with dozens of messages, most of which simply confirmed what I had already witnessed firsthand. Eventually, after several drop-offs and pickups, Riley quit her job to live at home with Annie full-time, while Susan had her sights set on Jack's income. This led to another flirtation and temptation until they finally fell in bed together. Charles and Catherine knew and helped hide it, even though Annie had frequently visited them, but a lollipop was sufficient to buy her silence. Riley lost everything. Jack left her for Susan. Charles and Catherine gave her nothing, not even a place to stay, and, worst of all, Annie, her own daughter, cried and screamed to stay with Susan, refusing to return to Riley. At first, she refused to accept reality and went to Charles, but he avoided her like the plague, saying, coolly, figure it out yourself. She then went to Catherine, the same woman she had once called mom with such warmth, but this time, Catherine refused to believe her. Even after letting her in, her tone was dismissive and icy. I only knew David and Susan as my children, you are nothing more than an outsider. At last, he realized that he had never known her as family, she had only ever been with him when she wandered the streets broken and lost until she realized there was still one place to go, her mother's house. That night, Riley stood outside my door, hesitant and exhausted, perhaps realizing how cruel she had been, lying to me, betraying me, taking my love for granted, and even standing in front of me and making fun of me. She had nothing anymore, though, and her hands were shaking when she pressed the doorbell. When I opened the door, Riley's lips were apart, but no words came out because her throat was dry, and I didn't look surprised or angry. She could stop the tears from streaming down her cheeks. Mom. I was incorrect. Instead of responding immediately, I just stared at her, wondering whether I should feel resentment, sadness, satisfaction, or nothing at all, but in my mind, I was still seeing unexpected memories, revealed a much younger Riley from the times when we were the only ones together. I allowed the silence to run its course before finally saying something inappropriate, which made her breath catch and caused her to bite her lip in an attempt to contain her tears. I shouldn't have lied to you, stood by their side, hurt you, or assumed you would. Always forgive me, I should never have disregarded everything you've done for me. She continued to confess her mistakes and apologize repeatedly, as though she could change the past with her own heartbreak. I let her talk without interjecting, and when she finally stopped talking, I said nothing but moved aside to make room for her to enter. Riley never attempted to win my forgiveness after that night. She knew she had lost that privilege and that her only option was to prove herself. She moved in quietly, without protest, and without complaining. Rather than demanding my love as she had in the past, Riley began learning how to cook and cleaning, listening, and taking care of me in the same way that I had taken care of her in the past. She no longer expected me to embrace her, so she just stayed, and as the days went by, so did the barriers I had put up. I continued to act cold and maintain my distance, but the resentment I once harbored it wasn't as strong as it used to be. One morning, after going for a walk, I stopped by a bakery on a whim and bought a box of Riley's favorite pastries. I didn't say anything when I put them on the table, instead, I just left them there, but when she saw them, her hands trembled. And new tears filled her eyes. Perhaps I hadn't ever truly forgiven her. But I was at least prepared to give her a chance. Years later, Riley had gone on to rebuild her life, find stability in her career, reclaim her independence, and finally move into a tiny apartment nearby. She continued to come see me on a daily basis, gave me homemade snacks and fresh flowers, and took me on nighttime walks. The first time, our relationship was no longer one-sided, with me giving in to her taking. Instead, we had established a balance that on the day she brought a tray of freshly made cupcakes, I took a bite out of one and gave a small nod. Riley's lips formed a gentle, sincere smile just across from me, and he knew it. Although we would never be able to return to our previous state, at least we still had the future.